Recently, I was looking through a thread on Twitter where everyone was sharing their favorite characters from the Warriors series, and I was pretty surprised that nowhere in the dozens of responses was there a mention of Firestar. Now, this really got me thinking, how exactly could the single most important and prominent character in the series not be found at the top of anyone's list? I think the cause of this ambivalence stems from the basic character archetype that Firestar represents. To put it simply, he's the outsider who in turn becomes the greatest insider. Rusty the kitty pet wasn't born of the world he comes to inhabit, but through destiny, he becomes a part of it. Once he eventually joins ThunderClan, Firepaw rises through the ranks, learning and embracing, slowly but surely, the fundamental values and virtue of the warrior code and StarClan. In his defining moment, he leads his newly adopted faction against his former brothers, who are so in both the abstract sense with BloodClan as a whole being of two-leg place, and the literal one with regards to Scourge being his half-brother. At its roots, this general archetype is extremely common and puts Firestar on ground with some of the greatest figures in literary history. As I've previously discussed, he compares in many ways to Moses of the Old Testament, as well as the Apostle Paul or Saul of Tarsus in the New Testament. In the modern day, he has much in common with the eponymous main character of the Harry Potter series, as well as characters such as Sully from James Cameron's Avatar, or Milo from Atlantis the Lost Empire, or even Miguel and Tulio from The Road to El Dorado. Again, I'm describing a character here whose fundamental journey is from outsider to insider to exalted. This archetype, I think, is properly broken up into a sequence containing three general components. Just to note, this sounded a lot less pretentious when I wrote it, so I'm just gonna get this over with. The first is outsider in a cold world, followed by insider of destiny, and finally providential leader of the insiders. I know, I should just stop right now. Honestly, if that doesn't get cited 1,000 times in academic papers, then I've truly embarrassed myself. As Firestar's archetype is shared by some of our greatest literary figures, it follows that it might seem ordinary to many readers, which I think, aside from overexposure, is the main explanation to the Warrior Cats fandom's apathetic reception to him. Firestar's journey begins as Rusty the kitty pet, the outsider in a cold world. And what I mean when I say this is obviously not a literal cold world. Moses, after all, spent his life baking under the sun of Egypt and the Sinai Peninsula. I mean cold here in the sense that the world Rusty lives in has made him feel isolated, unsatisfied, and given him a sense of what Karl Marx called alienation. We see this in other characters in this archetype as well. Harry Potter certainly embodies this with his years living with the Dursleys, and Moses in growing up as the Pharaoh's adopted son, separate from his true mother and the Hebrew people. Through the Call of Destiny, Rusty leaves Two-Leg Place to become Firepaw of ThunderClan. Now, what's significant to both this archetype and why Firestar was ultimately successful in-universe was the way he impacted ThunderClan. He's not an outsider who comes in and simply lives in a new place without adapting to their way of life, nor is he a reformer with his own ideas who fundamentally transforms the warrior way of life. However, what I think is Firestar gets warrior life and StarClan in a way that allows him to embody and save the clans in a way only he could. What makes Firestar unique is that he has a certain ethos about him that allows him to be kind of the ultimate warrior, even though he operates outside of warrior law. A pretty telling scene that begins to illustrate this point occurs during Into the Wild when Firepaw is first exploring the forest with Lionheart and Tigerclaw. After being introduced to the borders and all of the new clans for the first time, Firepaw remarks, "So many clans!" "You see now why prey is so precious," meowed Lionheart. "Why we must fight to protect what little we have. But that seems foolish. Why can't the clans work together and share their hunting grounds instead of fighting each other?" A shocked silence greeted his words. Tigerclaw was the first to reply. "That is treacherous thinking, kitty pet. Don't be too fierce, Tigerclaw." Tigerclaw? Yeah, that's what he sounds like, warned Lionheart. The ways of the clans are new to this apprentice. He looked at Firepaw. You speak from the heart, Firepaw. This will make you a stronger warrior one day. This passage actually foreshadows the later creation of Lion Clan under Firestar to combat Tiger Clan and Scourge at the end of the arc. It's even Lionheart who emphasizes that the thoughtful spirit of Firepaw's idea will serve him well down the road over Tiger Claw's hostility. It could be unintentional, but it does serve to highlight a duality between Firestar and Tiger Star's interpretation of what it means to be a warrior. For Firestar, he has a very loving and just nature that extends to all cats in all 4 clans, which is in line with the nature of StarClan and its warrior code, which I'll discuss more in a minute. Just a quick final point, I think it's hilariously ironic that Tiger Claw, the cat who's most offended by Firepaw's suggestion here, is the one who ultimately preaches that the 4 clans come together under one rule in Tiger Clan, and the fact that he's by far the most treacherous cat in the series. Anyways, note that Firestar doesn't ever permanently set out to create a single clan in the forest as he suggests here. Rather, it's the spirit of the idea that Lionheart praises, specifically his somewhat unconscious desire for the welfare of all of the clans that he implies in his phrasing. It's this greater principle, prosperity for all of the cats of the clans, that both defines Firestar's character throughout the series, as well as most properly encompasses the point of the warrior code. I've talked about this before, but as a means of ensuring the survival of the cats of the clans, the warrior code is flawless. Firestar's biggest failing as a warrior was playing fast and loose with the warrior code, namely subverting his duty and loyalty to his clan and leader. However, the nature of Firestar's sins always points back to the spirit of love and compassion he has for all of the clans. And even these violations of the warrior code are always for the greater collective good of the clans. For example, when Fireheart as ThunderClan's deputy goes behind Bluestar's back to negotiate peace with Tallstar in a dangerous path, he prevents a battle that would have resulted in casualties in both ThunderClan and WindClan during a time when there was a real threat in the dog pack that well could have exploited this moment of vulnerability. So even when he's wrong, Firestar's kind of ultimately right, at least in the spirit of the warrior code. In this sense, Firestar is a transcendent character, one who perfectly embodies not the law of the warrior code as was meant for normal warriors, but its ultimate goal. You wouldn't be mistaken in calling Firestar first among cats, because while he doesn't appear to have any divine nature or spirit to him, his will aligns with, or you could say reflects, the divine will of StarClan. In this light, and given the prophecy, fire alone can save our clan, you could kind of draw a parallel between Firestar and the Aryan view of Jesus as a creature aligned with the divine will of God the Father. Firestar is both a physical savior of the clans and also a spiritual one, who I argued in a previous video is ultimately the decisive factor in saving ThunderClan from following Tiger Claw down a similar road to that of Broken Star's Shadow Clan. But really, the better biblical comparison that I've made is that of Firestar and Moses. Obviously, they share the outsider angle, and both are chosen by the divine to deliver their people from the oppressors of the wicked world from which they came, the oppressors in both cases being led by an actual brother of theirs, Pharaoh being Moses' adopted brother, and Scourge being Firestar's half-brother. Both of them are not only great champions of their faiths, but they also work hand in hand, or paw in paw, with the divine to realize their destiny. Firestar with his visions of Spotted Leaf and other members of StarClan, along with the aforementioned prophecy and his 9 lives. Moses, meanwhile, has the famous burning bush scene preceding the later miracles he works with his staff and plagues he brings about through the will of God. This is what I meant by the insider of destiny part of the sequence. These two are great men, yes, but they're also willful vessels to the greater divine plans that shape their destinies. These great miracles that they work on behalf of their new people, whether it be Firestar's battle and resurrection against Scourge, which ultimately preserves the forest, Moses' parting of the Red Sea to deliver the Hebrews from and God's glory over Pharaoh, and his subsequent journey to lead them to the promised land that takes the rest of his life, Harry's destiny to fight Voldemort until death and his ultimate sacrifice to destroy the Horcrux contained within himself, and the Apostle Paul's subsequent preaching and writings of future New Testament canon after his life-changing vision of Jesus on the road to Damascus, and then of course his eventual martyrdom. All of these demonstrate the final part of the sequence, this providential leader of the Insiders. Either through divine selection or prophecy, these people who were born and lived early on as outsiders eventually find themselves leading the Insiders against their great enemies, and in demonstrating the greatest virtues of these Insiders, in these cases, they pay the ultimate price. However, on that point, while I do think the inclusion of death adds weight to the lives and themes of these characters, I don't think death, sacrifice, or martyrdom are necessary components of this archetype, as plenty of characters who fall into it live happily ever after, such as Sully from Avatar, Milo from Atlantis, Miguel and Tulio from Road to El Dorado, and even Indiana Jones in Temple of Doom fits this basic mold. In conclusion, Firestar is similar to a lot of characters in literature and film, so it's not really surprising that readers of the series kind of shrug at him, considering he's stacked against some of the most important and prominent characters in Western literature. To be clear, this isn't to imply any intention by Erin Hunter to specifically make Firestar in the mold of someone like Moses, but more to demonstrate Firestar's impact in his story by examining the traditions of the archetype he fits. If you thought any of the things I've said about Firestar in previous videos was unwarranted or overstated, hopefully you can see here that I'm grounding my interpretation of him in literary tradition, and I'm not just some postmodern critic who just squeezes whatever interpretations I want onto him. And perhaps even more importantly, I hope all aspiring writers take the time to identify and understand the types of characters they're creating. That way you'll be able to fulfill or subvert their respective archetypes in more powerful and memorable ways. And for those of you who just read or have had crippling writer's block for the last 5 years, hopefully you can use this to better contextualize and appreciate the work of other writers.